Have you ever wondered how one moment of judgment could change someone's life forever? What if I told you that the person you look down on today might be the one who changes your world tomorrow? Sarah Martinez sat in the cramped waiting room of Morrison Tech Solutions, her 5-year-old son Miguel pressed against her side. Her worn canvas purse rested on her lap, and her heart hammered so hard she was sure everyone in that San Antonio office could hear it. This interview wasn't just important, it was everything. It was the difference between keeping their tiny apartment in the West Side neighborhood and living in her beat-up Honda Civic. It was the difference between Miguel having dinner tonight or going to bed with just crackers and water again. She'd spent 3 hours that morning preparing for this moment. 3 hours she couldn't really afford, but desperation has a way of making time. She'd ironed her only interview outfit, a navy blazer she'd found at the Goodwill on Culebra Road, and a white blouse that had seen better days but was still presentable. She'd practiced her answers in the mirror while Miguel ate his breakfast of off-brand cereal, her voice steady and confident in the privacy of their bathroom. "I'm a hard worker. I'm reliable. I learn quickly." Over and over until the words felt real. But then, disaster struck. At 7:30 in the morning, just as she was putting on her shoes, her phone rang. It was Maria, her neighbor, who'd agreed to watch Miguel. Maria's voice was thick with apologetic tears. Her mother had fallen. She was at University Hospital. She couldn't watch Miguel today. She was so sorry. Sarah had stood there in her small living room, phone in hand, watching her last hope crumble. She'd called 6 other people. 6. But it was a Tuesday morning and everyone had jobs or kids of their own or wasn't answering. The interview was at 9:30. She'd rescheduled twice already. Once because Miguel had a fever, once because her car wouldn't start. She knew in her bones that if she called to reschedule again, they'd tell her not to bother. That position would go to someone else. Someone without complications. Someone without a 5-year-old son, so she'd made a choice. A choice born of pure desperation. She'd knelt down in front of Miguel, who was sitting on their threadbare couch watching cartoons, and she'd said, "Buddy, we're going on an adventure today, but I need you to be the best boy you've ever been. Can you do that for Mommy?" Miguel had looked at her with those enormous brown eyes. His father's eyes, the only good thing that man had left behind, and nodded solemnly. "I can be good, Mommy. I promise." She'd packed his backpack with everything she could think of. His coloring book and crayons. His favorite stuffed dinosaur Rex. A sandwich she'd made with the last of their bread and peanut butter. A juice box. His tablet with the cracked screen loaded up with downloaded shows that didn't need internet. And a prayer. She'd packed a prayer that somehow, some way, this would work out. Now, sitting in that waiting room, she could feel the stares. Oh, she could feel them like hot needles against her skin. The other candidates waiting. For their interviews looked at her with expressions, ranging from confusion to outright contempt. A woman in an expensive-looking gray suit leaned over to the man next to her and whispered something, her eyes cutting toward Miguel. They both smirked. Sarah's cheeks burned. She wanted to explain, to tell them all that she wasn't some irresponsible person who brought her kid to a job interview for fun. She wanted to scream that she'd been up since 5 in the morning, that she'd applied to 43 jobs in the past 2 weeks, that she'd sold almost everything she owned just to keep the lights on. But she didn't. She just pulled Miguel closer and pretended to study the motivational poster on the wall that read, "Innovation starts here," in bold blue letters. Miguel, bless his heart, was being an angel. He'd pulled out his coloring book and was carefully staying inside the lines of a picture of Spider-Man. His little tongue poked out the corner of his mouth the way it always did when he concentrated. Every few minutes, he'd look up at her with a small smile, as if to say, "See, Mommy? I'm being good." The receptionist, a young woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and a nameplate that read Brittany, kept shooting disapproving glances their way. Finally, she called out, "Sarah Martinez!" Sarah stood up quickly, smoothing down her blazer. "Yes, your interview is in 10 minutes. With Mr. Patterson, our HR director." Brittany's eyes dropped pointedly to Miguel. "I wasn't informed that you'd be bringing anyone with you." "I'm so sorry," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the humiliation crawling up her throat. "I had a childcare emergency this morning, and I didn't want to reschedule again. He'll be very quiet." "He won't be any trouble at all." Brittany's perfectly glossed lips pressed into a thin line. "I see. Well, I'll let Mr. Patterson know." The way she said it made it clear exactly what she'd be conveying, that Sarah was unprofessional, unreliable, and frankly, not worth their time. As Brittany walked away, the woman in the gray suit leaned towards Sarah. You know, some of us actually take our careers seriously. Maybe if you'd planned better, you wouldn't need to treat a professional interview like a playdate. The words hit Sarah like a slap. She felt Miguel tense against her side, his small body registering the meanness in the woman's tone. Even if he didn't understand all the words, Sarah opened her mouth to respond, to defend herself, to explain, to do something. But what came out was just, "I'm doing my best." "Well, your best isn't very impressive, is it?" the woman replied coldly. The man next to her chuckled, and Sarah felt something break inside her chest. Not break exactly, but crack. The kind of crack that happens when you've been holding yourself together with willpower and hope, and someone comes along and points out all the places where you're barely hanging on. She sat back down, pulling Miguel onto her lap now, wrapping her arms around him like he was a shield against the cruelty of the world. She buried her face in his dark curls for just a moment, breathing in the scent of the cheap kid's shampoo she'd bought at the dollar store. He smelled like childhood and trust and every reason she kept fighting. "Mommy," Miguel whispered, "are you sad?" "No, baby," she lied softly. Mommy's okay, but she wasn't okay. She was drowning. She was a 32-year-old woman with a high school diploma, 3 years of community college she'd never finished, and a resume full of gaps because she'd been raising Miguel alone since he was 6 months old. His father had left when the pregnancy test came back positive, and her own parents had died in a car accident when she was 23. She had no safety net, no backup plan. Just herself and Miguel against the world. The minutes ticked by. 10 minutes. 15. She watched other candidates go in and come out. Some looked confident. Some looked disappointed. None of them had a 5-year-old attached to their hip. Finally, Brittany called her name again. "Sarah Martinez? Mr. Patterson will see you now." Sarah stood, her legs shaky. She took Miguel's hand. "Come on, buddy." They walked down a hallway lined with photos of the company's achievements. Awards, ribbon cuttings, important-looking people shaking hands. The carpet was so plush and new that Sarah felt like she was leaving footprints, evidence of where she didn't belong. Brittany stopped at a door and knocked. "Mr. Patterson, Ms. Martinez is here with her son." "Send her in," came a voice from inside. Brittany opened the door and stepped aside, her expression making it clear she thought this was going to be a spectacular disaster. Sarah walked into the office, and there he was, Mr. Patterson, late 40s maybe, graying at the temples, expensive suit. The kind of man who'd probably never worried about whether he could afford both groceries and gas in the same week. He looked up from his desk, and his expression shifted from neutral to confused to something Sarah couldn't quite read when he saw Miguel. "Ms. Martinez," he said slowly, "I wasn't expecting you to bring your child to this interview." "I know, sir. I'm so sorry. I had a childcare emergency, and I didn't want to reschedule again. I know how valuable your time is, and I promise Miguel will be quiet. He's very well behaved." Mr. Patterson steeped his fingers, studying them both. The silence stretched out like taffy, thin and uncomfortable. Finally, he said, "I see. Well, this is highly unusual. I understand, sir. And if you'd prefer to end the interview now, I completely—" The door behind them burst open. Sarah spun around, and Miguel pressed against her leg. Standing in the doorway was a man in jeans and a simple button-down shirt, nowhere near as formal as everyone else in the building. He was maybe in his mid-50s, with kind eyes and an expression of surprise. "Patterson, I was just coming to grab those quarterly reports." But the man's eyes landed on Miguel, and something shifted in his face. Something Sarah couldn't identify, but that made her heart beat faster. Mr. Patterson stood up quickly. "Mr. Morrison, I didn't realize you were in the building today. I thought you were at the Austin office." Morrison. Sarah's mind raced. Morrison Tech Solutions. This was the CEO. This was the man who owned the entire company. And she was standing in front of him with her 5-year-old son at what was supposed to be a professional job interview she wanted to disappear, to melt into the expensive carpet and cease to exist. But then Mr. Morrison smiled, not at her, at Miguel. "Hey there, buddy," he said, kneeling down to Miguel's eye level. "What's your name?" And everything Sarah thought she knew about how this day would end was about to change forever. Miguel looked up at his mother, his eyes asking permission. Sarah nodded, her throat too tight to speak, and Miguel said quietly, "Miguel, I'm 5. 5? Wow, that's a great age." Mr. Morrison said warmly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small toy car, one of those sleek little die-cast models. You know what? I was just carrying this around. My grandson left it in my office. Do you like cars, Miguel? Miguel's eyes went wide and he looked at his mother again. Sarah, completely lost in the strangeness of this moment, nodded again. Miguel took the car carefully, like it was made of glass. Thank you, he whispered. Mr. Morrison stood up and looked at Sarah, really looked at her, in a way that made her feel seen for the first time since she'd walked into this building. Not judged, seen. Ms. Martinez, is it? He asked. Yes, sir. Sarah Martinez. I'm so sorry about bringing Miguel. I had a childcare emergency this morning, and I couldn't reschedule again. I know this looks unprofessional, but I promise I'm a hard worker. I'm reliable. I just needed to be here today, and I had no other choice. Mr. Morrison held up a hand gently. Ms. Martinez, stop apologizing. May I ask you something? Sarah nodded, her heart pounding. How far did you travel to get here today? About 40 minutes, sir. We live in the west side. And your childcare fell through this morning? Yes, sir. My neighbor was supposed to watch Miguel, but her mother had a medical emergency. So you were faced with a choice. Miss this interview or bring your son with you. And you chose to come anyway because this opportunity matters to you. It wasn't a question, but Sarah answered anyway. Yes, sir. This job, I really need this job. I've been unemployed for 8 months. I've applied everywhere. I have bills I can't pay, and Miguel needs so much, and Her voice cracked, and she hated herself for it. I'm trying so hard. The office was silent, except for the quiet sound of Miguel making his new toy car drive along the arm of the chair Sarah had been directed to sit in. Mr. Morrison looked at Mr. Patterson, who seemed frozen, unsure how to react to his boss's presence and this unconventional situation. Then Mr. Morrison looked back at Sarah. Mr. Patterson, I'd like to conduct this interview myself, if you don't mind. Patterson's eyebrows shot up. Sir, I'll take it from here. Thank you. It was clearly a dismissal. Patterson stood looking uncertain and slightly irritated, but he nodded. Of course, Mr. Morrison. He left, closing the door behind him. Sarah felt like she'd entered some alternate dimension where the rules no longer applied. CEOs didn't conduct entry-level interviews. They certainly didn't conduct interviews with candidates who'd brought their children along. This didn't make sense. Mr. Morrison sat down in the chair Patterson had vacated and gestured for Sarah to sit as well. Please, have a seat. Miguel, you can sit right there next to your mom. That's a great spot for cars to drive. Miguel climbed onto the chair next to Sarah, and she could see he was being extra careful with his coloring book and the new toy, trying to be as good as he'd promised. So, Sarah, may I call you Sarah? Of course, sir. Please, call me Jack. Now tell me about yourself. Not the resume version, the real version. And so she did. Maybe it was the kindness in his eyes, or maybe it was because she was so tired of pretending to be someone she wasn't. But Sarah told him the truth. She told him about how she'd been working as a receptionist at a dental office until they downsized and let her go. She told him about taking community college classes in business administration until she got pregnant with Miguel and had to drop out because she couldn't afford both tuition and baby supplies. She told him about Miguel's father leaving, about her parents' accident, about the endless cycle of applying for jobs and getting rejected or never hearing back at all. She told him about the nights she'd gone to bed hungry so Miguel could have dinner, about how she'd sold her mother's wedding ring, the only thing of value she'd had left, to pay their rent last month, about how she was 3 weeks away from eviction and losing their car, which would make finding a job even harder because San Antonio wasn't exactly known for its public transportation. Jack Morrison listened to all of it without interrupting, his expression thoughtful and kind. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Sarah, can I tell you a story? Of course. 32 years ago, I was you. Different circumstances, same desperation. I was 23, my wife Emily was 22, and we had a 6-month-old son named David. I'd just gotten laid off from my job at a manufacturing plant in Houston. We were living in a 1-bedroom apartment that had roaches and mold and cost more than we could afford. Emily was trying to work part-time while taking care of David, but childcare was impossible to find and afford. Sarah watched him, seeing the memory play across his face. I had an interview for a sales position at a tech company. Nothing fancy. Cold calling businesses, trying to sell them computer systems they probably didn't need. But it paid better than the manufacturing job, and it had benefits. Real benefits, with health insurance for my family. The morning of the interview, Emily got called in for an emergency shift at the diner where she worked. Someone had no-showed, and they threatened to fire her if she didn't come in. We needed that income. We couldn't lose it. "So, you brought your son to the interview?" Sarah said softly, understanding flooding through her. Jack nodded. "I brought David. I was so ashamed. I felt like a failure as a father, as a husband, as a man. The other candidates looked at me like I was crazy. The receptionist told me outright that I should just leave and stop wasting everyone's time." "What happened?" "I was about to leave when the hiring manager came out. His name was Robert Chen. He saw me standing there with David in my arms, all my hope draining away. And you know what he did?" Sarah shook her head. He smiled. "He took David from me, just reached out and said, 'May I?' And he carried my son into his office. He let David sit on his lap during the entire interview. And at the end, he hired me. He said anyone who had the courage to show up when life was kicking them down was someone he wanted on his team." Sarah felt tears building behind her eyes. "That job changed my life. Sarah, I worked my way up in that company. I learned everything I could. I saved every penny. 10 years later, I left and started Morrison Tech Solutions with 3 other partners. I bought them out over the years, and now this company employs over 200 people across Texas. We do $15 million in revenue annually. And it all started because one man gave me a chance when I had nothing to offer but desperation and determination." "Robert Chen," Sarah said. "Robert Chen," Jack confirmed. "He passed away 5 years ago. Lung cancer, but I got to tell him before he died that everything I had, everything I'd built, started with his kindness that day. And I made him a promise." "What promise?" Jack leaned forward. "That whenever I saw someone fighting as hard as I had fought, someone who showed up when showing up was the hardest thing in the world, I'd give them the same chance he gave me." The tears Sarah had been holding back finally fell, silent and hot down her cheeks. "Sarah Martinez, if you want this job, it's yours." She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't believe what she was hearing. "The position is administrative assistant in our operations department. It's 40 hours a week, benefits start after 90 days, and it pays $18 an hour. It's not glamorous, but it's steady work. And if you prove yourself, and something tells me you will, there's room to grow in this company." I don't know what to say," Sarah managed. "Say yes. Say you'll start Monday." "Yes," Sarah whispered. Then louder, "Yes, I'll be here Monday. I'll be early. I'll work harder than anyone. I promise you won't regret this." Jack smiled. "I already know I won't. Now let's talk logistics. You mentioned childcare as an issue. I'll figure it out. I promise. It won't interfere with my work. I'm sure you will figure it out. But let me help. We have a partnership with a childcare center 2 blocks from here, Sunshine Academy. It's specifically for employees and their families. The company subsidizes most of the cost. For you, until you're back on your feet financially, we'll cover it entirely for the first 6 months." Sarah put her hand over her mouth, the sobs building in her chest. "We're also going to set you up with our employee assistance program. They can help you with financial counseling, connecting you with resources for things like food assistance until you get a few paychecks under your belt. We take care of our people here, Sarah. That's not just company talk. That's how we operate." Miguel looked up at his mother, sensing something important was happening. "Mommy, why are you crying?" She pulled him into her lap and held him tight. "Happy tears, baby. These are happy tears." Jack stood and extended his hand. Sarah stood too, shifting Miguel to her hip and shook Jack's hand firmly. "Welcome to Morrison Tech Solutions, Sarah. I'll have HR drop your paperwork today. Come in Monday morning at 8. Wear whatever you're comfortable in. We're pretty casual around here. And Sarah, yes? Thank you for showing up today. Thank you for being the kind of mother who fights for her son, even when it's hard. Miguel's lucky to have you." As they left Jack Morrison's office and walked back through the hallway, Sarah felt like she was floating. The same people who'd stared at her with judgment before now looked at her with curiosity. Word had clearly spread that the CEO had conducted her interview personally. Brittany, the receptionist, looked up with wide eyes as they passed. "Ms. Martinez, Mr. Morrison left instructions that we're to give you a parking pass and building access. I'll get those prepared for Monday." Her tone was completely different now. Respectful, almost nervous. Sarah just nodded, too overwhelmed to feel any satisfaction from the reversal. As they walked to their car, her beat-up, held together with prayers, Honda, Miguel swung their joined hands happily. Mommy, that was a good adventure. Can we have crackers when we get home? Baby, we can have so much more than crackers. We're going to go to the grocery store, and you can pick out whatever cereal you want. The good kind. With the cartoon characters. Miguel's face lit up like Christmas morning. Sarah drove home with tears still sliding down her face. But for the first time in 8 months, they weren't tears of fear or frustration. They were tears of relief, of hope, of the overwhelming gratitude that comes when someone sees you, really sees you, and decides you're worth betting on. That weekend, she cleaned their apartment until it sparkled. She used her last bit of money to buy a new notebook and pens for her first day. She practiced her route to the office 3 times to make sure she knew exactly where to park and how long it would take. She researched the company, reading everything she could about Morrison Tech Solutions and what they did. And on Sunday night, after she'd put Miguel to bed and kissed his forehead, she sat at their tiny kitchen table and wrote a letter. It was addressed to Jack Morrison, and in it, she made him a promise. A promise that she would work harder than anyone else in that building, that she would prove his faith in her wasn't misplaced, that she would pay forward his kindness to someone else when she got the chance. She folded the letter carefully and put it in her purse, planning to leave it on his desk Monday morning. Monday came with sunshine and a nervous energy that had Sarah awake at 5 a.m. She dressed carefully in casual but professional clothes, jeans and a nice blouse, like Jack had said. She helped Miguel get ready, packing his backpack with everything he'd need for his first day at Sunshine Academy. They arrived at 7:30, early like she'd promised herself. The parking garage was nearly empty. She found the spot marked with her name, her actual name, on a sign that said S. Martinez, and she had to sit in the car for a moment, just looking at it. Miguel unbuckled himself and climbed into the front seat to hug her. "You okay, Mommy?" "Yeah, buddy. I'm okay. I'm really, really okay." She walked Miguel to Sunshine Academy, which was even better than she'd imagined. Bright, clean, with teachers who actually seemed to love what they did. Miguel barely looked back as he ran off to join other kids in the play area. Then Sarah walked into Morrison Tech Solutions as an employee for the first time. She found her desk in the operations department, clean, organized, with a welcome basket that included company swag and a handwritten note from the team. Her direct supervisor, a kind woman named Patricia, showed her around and introduced her to everyone. The work was exactly what Jack had described. Administrative tasks, scheduling, coordinating between departments. Nothing she couldn't handle. Nothing she wouldn't excel at. During her lunch break, she took the letter she'd written to Jack Morrison's office on the top floor. His assistant, a man named Kevin, saw her approaching. "Can I help you?" "I just wanted to leave this for Mr. Morrison. It's a thank you note." Kevin smiled. "He's actually in right now. Let me see if he has a moment." Before Sarah could protest that she didn't want to interrupt, Kevin had disappeared into the office. A moment later, he reappeared. "He'll see you." Sarah walked into Jack Morrison's office, the letter clutched in her hand. Jack looked up from his computer and smiled. "Sarah, how's your first day going?" "It's wonderful. Everyone has been so welcoming. I just wanted to bring you this and say thank you again." "For everything." She handed him the letter. He opened it and read it right there, his expression growing soft. When he finished, he looked up at her with eyes that were a little too bright. "Sarah, this means a lot to me, but you don't owe me anything. You earned this position by being willing to fight for your family." "That's all I needed to see." "Still," Sarah said, "what you did, what you're doing, it's changing my life. Miguel's life. I won't forget it." Jack stood and came around his desk. "Can I tell you one more thing?" "Of course. When I saw you in that waiting room last week with your son, being judged by people who had no idea what you'd been through to get there, it brought back every feeling I'd had 32 years ago. And I thought about Robert Chen, and how one moment of kindness from him changed everything for me and my family. My son David, he's now a surgeon in Dallas. My daughter Laura, we had her a few years later. She's a teacher in Austin. They both have families, successful careers, and good lives. And it all started because someone gave me a chance." Sarah felt the tears coming again. "So no, Sarah, I should be thanking you for reminding me why I do what I do, for showing me that there are still people out there fighting as hard as I once fought, for bringing Miguel with you that day, because it gave me the opportunity to be for you what Robert Chen was for me." He extended his hand again, and Sarah shook it, holding on perhaps a moment longer than necessary. "Now go on," Jack said with a smile. Get back to work. Patricia runs a tight ship, and I don't want you getting in trouble on your first day because the CEO kept you too long. Sarah laughed. Actually laughed and headed back to her desk. The weeks that followed were like a dream. Sarah threw herself into her work with everything she had. She arrived early, stayed late when needed, and volunteered for projects no one else wanted. She learned the company's systems inside and out. She made herself indispensable, and Miguel thrived at Sunshine Academy. He made friends. He learned new things. He was happy. 3 months in, when her benefits kicked in, Sarah cried again, this time when she received the insurance cards in the mail. Real health insurance. For her and Miguel. She could take him to the doctor for his checkup without worrying about the bill. 6 months in, Patricia called her into her office. Sarah's heart had jumped into her throat, old fears rising up. Was she in trouble? Had she done something wrong? But Patricia had smiled and said, Sarah, you've been doing exceptional work. We'd like to promote you to Operations Coordinator. It comes with a raise and more responsibilities. Are you interested? Was she interested? Sarah had practically floated out of that office. A year in, Sarah had her own small team. She was respected, valued. She'd paid off her back rent and utilities. She'd saved enough for a small emergency fund. She'd bought Miguel new clothes that actually fit, toys that weren't from garage sales, books that didn't have pages missing. She'd rebuilt her life from the ashes. But the most important moment came on a Tuesday afternoon, almost exactly 1 year after her interview. Sarah was walking through the building when she saw Jack Morrison in the hallway talking to a young woman who looked nervous and defeated. Next to her was a little girl, maybe 7 years old, holding the woman's hand. Sarah slowed her steps, watching. The woman was explaining something to Jack, her voice apologetic. I'm so sorry. I know I shouldn't have brought her, but I didn't have anyone to watch her, and I couldn't miss this interview. I've rescheduled 3 times already, and Jack held up his hand gently. Stop apologizing. Let's go talk in my office. He looked over and caught Sarah's eye. He smiled. She smiled back. And in that moment, Sarah understood. This was the cycle. This was how kindness multiplied. Jack had paid forward what Robert Chen had done for him. And someday, when Sarah had the power and position to do so, she'd do the same for someone else. The circle would continue. That night, Sarah tucked Miguel into bed and sat next to him, stroking his hair like she'd done every night since he was born. Mommy, Miguel said sleepily, remember when we went to your work interview and everyone was mean except the nice man? I remember, baby. I'm glad he was nice. Because now you're happy again? I'm very happy, Miguel. Very, very happy. Good. Miguel yawned. You should always be happy, Mommy. You're the best. Sarah kissed his forehead and turned out the light. She stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her son sleep in his own bed, in their apartment that she could afford, with a full belly and a safe future. One moment of kindness had changed everything, and it was still changing everything, spreading outward like ripples in water, touching lives in ways that would echo for generations. But Sarah's story wasn't quite finished yet, because sometimes the universe has one more gift to give. 18 months after Sarah started at Morrison Tech Solutions, the company announced they'd be opening a new division focused on employee development and community outreach. They were looking for someone to lead it, someone who understood what it meant to struggle, someone who'd been on the other side of rejection and judgment, someone who could build programs that would actually help people. Patricia had called Sarah into her office. I'm recommending you for the position. Sarah had stared at her, speechless. Me? But I don't have a degree. I don't have experience in that kind of... You have something better than a degree, Sarah. You have empathy. You have determination. And you have a story that will inspire every person we're trying to help. Jack specifically asked me to recommend someone who would understand our mission, not just manage it. You're that person. The interview process had been rigorous, even with the recommendation. Sarah had to present a proposal for what the new division would look like, how it would operate, what measurable outcomes it would achieve. She'd worked on that proposal for 3 weeks, staying up late after Miguel went to bed, researching best practices, calling community organizations to understand what resources already existed and where the gaps were. Her proposal had included partnerships with childcare centers, job training programs, financial literacy workshops, and a mentorship initiative where established employees would guide new hires who were struggling. She'd called it the second chance initiative, and she'd poured her heart into every page. The day she presented to Jack and the board of directors, her hands had shaken so badly she could barely hold her notes. But once she started talking, the passion took over. She told them about the mother in the West Side who couldn't take a job because she couldn't afford childcare, about the father who had a criminal record from a mistake 20 years ago and couldn't get past that checkbox on applications, about the young person aging out of foster care with no family support and no idea how to navigate the professional world. She told them that giving people jobs was important, but giving people the tools and support to keep those jobs and grow in them, that was transformational. When she finished, the room was silent. Jack Morrison had tears in his eyes. "When can you start?" he'd asked. Now, 6 months into leading the Second Chance Initiative, Sarah stood in the conference room of Morrison Tech Solutions, watching 50 people file in for the first graduation ceremony. These were people who'd completed the job training program she'd developed. Single parents, formerly incarcerated individuals, people who'd been unemployed for years, refugees still learning English, young people from underserved communities who'd never thought they'd have a shot at a career in tech. They'd all been through 12 weeks of intensive training in customer service, basic IT skills, professional communication, and financial literacy. And they'd all been matched with companies, including Morrison Tech Solutions, that had committed to giving them a fair shot. Sarah watched as they received their certificates, as they shook hands with potential employers, as they smiled with the same kind of hope she'd felt 18 months ago. Miguel sat in the front row, 9 years old now, watching his mother with pride that made her heart want to burst. Jack Morrison stood at the podium to give the closing remarks. 18 months ago, a young woman walked into this building with her 5-year-old son, desperate for a chance. She'd been judged, dismissed, and told she didn't belong here. But she showed up anyway. She fought anyway. And in doing so, she reminded me of why this company exists. Not just to make profits, but to change lives. He looked directly at Sarah. That woman is Sarah Martinez, and she's now the director of our Second Chance Initiative. The program you've all just completed exists because Sarah had the courage to show up on her hardest day, and because she never forgot what it felt like to need someone to believe in her. The applause was thunderous. Sarah felt her cheeks heat with embarrassment and pride. After the ceremony, as people mingled and celebrated, a young woman approached Sarah hesitantly. She was maybe 22, with haunted eyes that Sarah recognized from her own mirror years ago. "Ms. Martinez, I just wanted to say thank you. I'm Jasmine. I was in the foster care system until I aged out last year. I've been homeless, couch surfing, trying to finish my GED while working 3 part-time jobs. I applied to this program thinking I'd never get in, and when I did, I thought there had to be a mistake." Sarah took Jasmine's hands. "There was no mistake. You earned your spot here. I start at Morrison Tech next week, in customer service. It's the first real job I've ever had with benefits and everything. I can get an apartment, a real one, with my name on the lease. Jasmine's voice broke. "I just wanted you to know what this means. You changed my life." Sarah pulled Jasmine into a hug, and she was transported back to that day in Jack Morrison's office, when he'd told her she had the job. The overwhelming relief and gratitude. The feeling that finally, someone saw her worth. "You changed your own life, Jasmine. You showed up. You did the work. All I did was open the door. You're the one who walked through it." As Jasmine walked away to join the other graduates, Sarah felt a hand slip into hers. She looked down to see Miguel, now 7 years old, looking up at her with those same brown eyes that had watched her struggle and never lost faith. "Mommy, you helped all these people like Mr. Jack helped us?" Sarah knelt down and pulled him close. "That's right, baby. And someday, when you're grown up, you'll help someone too. That's how it works. Kindness doesn't end. It just keeps growing." Across the room, Jack Morrison caught her eye and raised his coffee cup in a silent toast. Sarah raised hers back. 2 people who'd been given second chances, now giving them to others. The woman in the gray suit who'd mocked her in that waiting room 18 months ago. She'd applied to work at Morrison Tech 3 times since then and been rejected each time. Not because Sarah had anything to do with it, she hadn't, but because attitude matters, and companies that value people can smell contempt from a mile away. Meanwhile, Sarah had just signed the lease on a real apartment with 2 bedrooms. Miguel had his own room for the first time in his life. They had health insurance, savings, a future that didn't terrify her every single day. That night, after Miguel was asleep, Sarah stood at her window looking out at the San Antonio skyline. She thought about the woman she'd been. Desperate, ashamed, fighting so hard just to survive. And she thought about the woman she'd become. Strong, purposeful, proof that one moment of kindness could change everything. She whispered into the darkness, "Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Robert Chen. Thank you to everyone who believes in second chances." And somewhere in the city, another single mother was lying awake, wondering if tomorrow would be the day everything changed. It would be. Because Sarah Martinez was building a world where showing up on your hardest day wasn't the end of your story. It was just the beginning. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Because everyone deserves to hear stories about the power of kindness, second chances, and the incredible things that happen when someone believes in you. Share this with someone who needs hope today. Your story isn't over, it's just beginning.